Hello everyone, it's Silvia. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm very excited because I'm going to do a VR to Rachel's video 11 decks I'm currently crushing on, and that video was really amazing. I have to say that recently I haven't seen a lot of tags on TarotTube, which is very sad because I love watching TarotTube, I love watching videos, and when there's a tag it's fun because I immediately start picking out my very own choices for those prompts. But this one was from, I believe, last week, so I had time to do a thorough search throughout all of my decks, and it was an easy one this time because it was fun, but it was also something that is related to decks that I'm currently using, currently really appreciating and loving, and so obviously I had to go with the ones that are on my desk. So as always, I'll make sure to post the link to the original video in the description box below so you can check it out. And let's start. So as always, you know me, it's probably going to be more than 11 decks because every time I think about a deck, every time I present it on my channel, I immediately start thinking about other decks that are either similar, or maybe if it's a tarot deck, I will be thinking about an oracle deck that can pair nicely with it. So bear with me, it's probably more than 11, but let's start. I am going to start with a couple of decks that I now use together. I did not start my journey with these two decks by using them together, but I do now because these are the two, let's say, two different versions, quite different versions of a tarot deck that is from a few years ago. It is called the Tarot of the Holy Spectrum. This is an amazing deck. I have to admit that it actually grew on me. I wasn't necessarily so taken with it when I first bought it. So the first version that I got out of Chloe from the Mystical House down in Melbourne was this edition here. And let me just open it up because I know that there are a couple of differences when it comes to even the very first edition. So this is the second edition, first printing. So if you're after this one in specific, I do not believe that it's in print any longer. However, there might be someone parting homes with this deck in one of your numerous Facebook groups or Etsy or eBay or you name it. So the reason why I'm specifying this, that it's the second edition first printing, is because I believe that either the first edition or a second printing of the second edition have a different devil card. So I will show you the devil card and I will explain to you why this is by far my favorite. So let's have a look at this one first, because this one is the mirror edition, and I will show you why I prefer this devil card. It is very much a personal reason. Let's say it resonates more with me, and it really gives me the opportunity to do some kind of shadow work, reflecting on the things that I find more triggering for me in specific. So this is the devil card, and let me just zoom in because obviously we want to be able to see these cards properly. So as you can see, this is the devil card, and if you read all of these sentences around this character, they are very triggering, at least for me. They might not be triggering for other people, but the way in which I lived my life, all of my experiences, and also my deeper spheres, which are part of my shadow work, are reflected in at least some of these sentences. So I'll be forgotten, or fear, you're not enough, self-doubt, why even try, should, I can't, I have to, everyone hates me, don't deserve to be heard, fear of change, no one cares, and I'm worthless. I believe that this is a card that throughout the years, this deck was published in 2020, so it's now 2025. I haven't bought it immediately, but I probably only waited a few months after it was published. So I have been working with this deck for at least 4 years, if not longer. And those were years of really intense emotional work. And the reason why I've come to really appreciate this deck, and in specific this card, is because it did indeed give me the possibility to do some well needed, some deeply needed, rooted work of self-worth, and try and understand why I've always hesitated in presenting myself. Even looking at this channel, for example, it took me 2 years to actually start showing my face, and that's not a random fact. It is because I do have a lot of problems with my body image, the way I look, and if you add up the aging process to that, it obviously leads you down a path that sometimes is very, very difficult to come back from. So this Devil card has been a teacher for me, and it's ironic because I personally read tarot numerologically. And so the Devil is the number 15, so it's number 1 and 5. So if you sum those two numbers up, those two digits, you get the number 6, which is reflecting and mirroring on the Lover. So together with my members, we've done, and we're still doing, a reading course, a pro reading course, let's say, so a much more advanced reading course. And what we're looking at is numerous ways to read tarot, among which also numerology. So you will see that in numerology, when you look at the major arcana, and specifically at the number 6, so the Lovers, you will have all the other number 6s of a tarot deck that are part of the major arcana Lovers constellation. And so constellation means that it is relatable to the original major arcana. So the Devil is ironically acting as a teacher to the Lovers card. And I know that it's a bit of a out there kind of concept, but believe me, it actually really gives you a lot of new ideas on how to read this card, because the Devil actually forces the Lovers to do that kind of really difficult choice, to take that path that is very difficult. But at the same time, it also helps you understand that that is by choosing the most difficult path out of the two that you actually do much better work of improvement on your self-worth. And who would have thought that the Devil would have meant for me an improvement on my self-worth? It is by facing something that scares you the most that you understand how to overcome that, and then you get out of that path with an additional or a new way to look at yourself. So this is an incredibly important card for me. As a consequence of that, I will have to say that this has become throughout the years one of my favorite decks. Ironically, I don't necessarily use it for general readings, the 3 cards pull that I often do, or even members reading, unless a member asks specifically for this deck, or a client asks for this deck. I do not propose it. I don't say, hey, what would you say if I use this deck? Because I know that not everyone resonates with this. It is called the Tarot of the Holy Spectrum, and obviously we do have a lot of playing with colors in this deck. There's a lot of use of basic black, and I refer to basic black as the color that we often find in the background of these cards, like in this case for the Justice card, but it's also the other color. It's not the main color. In many cards you will see that you have maybe one main color, like this one is the yellow, a predominant color, but then the black is there in order to create that contrast. The black is there to outline the characters that are depicted in these cards. And so the black color becomes just as important as the main or predominant color in the cards. I really like the idea behind using these colors in this deck. And you can imagine how surprised I was when I heard that the same creator was actually coming out with another deck that was looking into colors from a different perspective, and that was also taking the possibility to reflect on those colors and grabbing all of the colors that are around the cards and bring them into the cards themselves. let me just explain this briefly. You can see here that this is not just, let's say, the box that is, it's got a mirror effect, but when you open this deck, which ironically comes with this cloth that you can use to clean the backs of the cards after you leave all of the prints, because trust me, it will happen. I just, you know, I can show you here, for example, as you can see, you can already see my prints, which is fine because it's very easy, they're very easy to clean with the cloth. So this deck really wants, by being a mirror, really wants to mirror and catch all of the colors that are around the cards, like I'm doing in this case, you see. And then by doing so, it actually absorbs them and brings them into the cards themselves. So when we turn the deck this way, what we will see will be very saturated color, really brilliant. I really love the way this deck is laid out. This deck has been well thought. And it does present you with the opportunity to read it in such a different way from, let's call it the original edition, which is not the original because this is already the second edition. I don't have the first edition. I honestly don't even think that the devil in the first edition, as I was mentioning earlier, will have all of those sentences. As a matter of fact, I believe that even the devil in this edition, so the mirror edition, will not present you with those triggering sentences. I don't know whether the creator, and by the way, I forgot to name the creator, my bad. So the creator is Chase for Haste, and I'm reading the name for Haste in the Dutch way. I don't know whether it's the correct way or not. I hope I'm not making a mistake. What I do appreciate about this deck is that when you look at the colors and the brilliance of these colors, they don't act as some kind of a distraction. They don't distract me. They still keep me within the frame. They still keep me interested in the cards. They look at the cards, and this is the devil. So the devil, as you can see, it is rather different. It doesn't have all of the sentences around it, but it is like a fluo green, and it does remind me of, for example, if you were reading Goosebumps by R.L. Stein when you were a kid, you will remember that in many cases the title Goosebump was written in this kind of toxic green, Hulk kind of green, and it was referring to the toxicity, but also in a fun way, let's say, because Goosebumps, of course, were sort of horror stories for teenagers, let's say. So I love that it reminds me of those books, because the devil can be seen as something really scary, and obviously that is the theme behind the triggering of the sentences for me. It is scary to face the fact that I'm worried about being forgotten, I'm worried about being worthless, I'm worried about not being enough. It is scary, and in a world where image is becoming more and more you know, the brand of a person, especially when you're online, this is something very difficult to face, very difficult to confront yourself with. So this devil is still confronting, but not as much as the devil in the other deck. And yet I really appreciate this deck. I love the fact that in many cases we have fluo colors for the hair, you know, of the characters. I love the fact that it looks like there's some kind of a neon light sometimes coming out of the shapes of the objects. Or for example, I love that the star card, this is an amazing star card for me. You guys know that I love the star card, and I love the fact that there is this kind of mirroring between the northern lights in the sky and the liquid that is actually coming out of this cup. You know, in this body of water that could be a river or a lake. Really, really passionate about this deck. I could gush over this deck. I could talk about it for hours. Unfortunately, there's no guidebook that I know of. I double checked in the website just to double check that there might have been something published recently. I couldn't find it. So it is one of those decks that will let you look at your own intuition and rely on it. What I like to point out is that the Fool in this deck, and also in the previous edition that I've shown you, is the only card in both decks that has all of the colors of the spectrum. So the whole spectrum is contained in the full card, and what a magnificent concept to be looking at a deck. So I just wanted to show you how I use these two together, because I believe that when we talk about pairings, we don't always have to stop at the Tarot and Oracle deck. We can certainly use two tarot decks together. And it's the way in which these two decks differ that really lets me pair them up together, because they don't look the same. And so in the differences, you can read a lot. For example, I've got the Tower with the Page of Pentacles. And so obviously this Page of Pentacles is telling me that there is that necessity to reconnect with nature. But it's also telling me that the pages are the very first in the evolution of the core cards, and they don't necessarily have the experience and maturity in order to understand what to keep with them and what to let go of. And so they need to be taught by the Tower. The Tower movement would definitely point to what needs to be conserved and what no longer serves you. And then moving on, we got, for example, two swords in this case, but they are mirror. Do you see how the number 6 and the number 4 are mirrors? Because obviously it's almost as if we had a mirror in the middle, and we see this image split in two. So there is the transaction of the 6 of Swords that actually leads you to that moment in which you stop everything and you need to recuperate your energy. This is obviously going backwards, so that tells me something already, because the 6 normally comes after the 4, but in this case the 4 comes after the 6. So why is this happening? Perhaps that moment of transaction was not enough to take me to a safer shore, and so I need to still move on. But before I do that, because the transaction of the 6 consumed a lot of energy, this tells me that I unfortunately need to take a rest, and then I will be ready to start my movement again. And then, for example, we got another 6, we got the 6 of Wands with the 10 of Swords. So the 6 of Wands is a card that comes with a caveat, a warning, and it says, yes, you are winning so far, and fantastic, and you've been awarded with a prize, and you're now showing it off to everyone, your wreath, your crown, that is wonderful, everyone is cheering you up, but don't forget to give credit where credit is due. You did not reach that goal on your own. You were supported by your team. Let's not forget that one really good way to read is sequential. So read the sequence. Remember what happens if you don't credit your team. In the 7 of Wands, you will be having to stick up for your guns and having to defend yourself from the attacks of that team. Why? Because you forgot to acknowledge the value that they had in your endeavor. And so the 10 of Swords is reconnecting you with that possibility, telling you that there is such a point in which victory is not enough, or victory is no longer something that supports you. And so just take it in, just absorb all of the energies that you want, but never forget to acknowledge your team and how important they were for you. And the 2 of Swords with the 3 of Cups, understanding that. Now, I was reading something really interesting about the 2 of Swords the other day, and I really found that it resonated with me. So the 2 of Swords is because we're looking at the 2 of Swords as the suit of air, and obviously it is the suit of the mind. It tells us that we need to take a decision by using our intellect, and that's the reason why you will see that a lot of decks present the character that is depicted on the 2 of Swords as blindfolded. So your eyesight is not necessary anymore. As a matter of fact, it could also become a hindrance. It could actually stop you from understanding what your true choice is, and that you need to reach that with your mind. However, when you read sequentially like I do, at the same time as numerologically, you will never forget what happens in the 3 of Swords. Postponing, the 2 of Swords is the postponement. You're postponing because you don't necessarily trust your choice. You don't trust your intuition. And what happens when you keep on postponing? The choices that you had in front of you, they were no longer there. And of course, you feel the overwhelm of the 3 of Swords. And the 3 of Cups tells you that sometimes you also need to use your heart. So I really love reading with these two together. As I said, they are different enough for you to be able to focus on the two different messages and find them complementary. I really love the way they interact as well. And yes, of course, it is the same creator and it is the same deck, even though two different versions. So obviously the art style will resonate. You will find a way to build bridges between these two. But I have to say, I absolutely love these two decks. When thinking about my choices, I will always have to think about the Star card of the Mirror edition and the Devil card of the second edition first printing, because they mean so much to me. And so these are definitely two decks that I have absolutely no problem in choosing when thinking about my top 11 decks I'm really vibing with right now. But before we move on to the next decks, I just wanted to confirm that the giveaway for the Zodiac pack from the company Author Spirit will continue until the end of March. So if you want to enter this giveaway, you just have to go back into my video where I talk about my partnership with Author Spirit, and you have to follow the instruction to enter for this giveaway. This one is also a Zodiac pack, and it's the Zodiac pack referring to the sign of Aquarius, which is my sign. That's why I chose it. And Author Spirit is a fantastic company. I've talked about this company before. They use ethically sourced stones, semi-precious stones and crystals, which is very important for me. But the most important thing, and the reason why I've actually accepted a partnership with them, is that for each and every one of these bracelets and also earrings and necklaces that they sell, they will donate $1 to the various charity organization around Monterey, California, where the company is based, that are dedicated to saving sea otters. And that is something that I find incredibly uplifting, because personally, as a tarot reader, you will know there's a lot of tarot decks that represent otters. Otters are incredibly symbolical animals. And I really love that Author Spirit is dedicating this driven passion to just try and preserve this fantastic animal. So if you want to enter the giveaway, you have time until the 31st of March, as I said. But moving on to the next deck. So these next two are decks that you probably would have guessed. If you have watched my channel for any length of time, you will know how much I love quirky decks. And in many cases, quirky decks can also be seen as dark decks. Not all the time, but this one is very quirky, and it's the Soul Splash. I've talked about this deck a couple of times already. I have done an unboxing. I bought this deck for my birthday as my own personal present for myself. The Soul Splash Tarot is currently, I believe it's for sale on Vermilion Collection, and I can vouch for them. These are all authentic decks, and it came to me within 10-12 days of when I ordered it, so I was really stoked, very happy about that. They have fantastic prices. There are two methods for shipping. One is express, so you will have to pay for them, but one is free. So if you choose free shipping, it may take a bit longer, but you will still get the deck for free, which is, I mean, you pay just for the deck and not for the shipping, which is always amazing. Let me just show you this deck. I love it so much. And so the copyright is by War Studio, and it's a deck that has been made in 2024, although I believe that it was just available at the beginning of 2025, because I knew that they had it on pre-order on websites such as Tevada, for example, and then it was to be available by mid-January or something like that. That's why I bought it only in mid-February. So it does come with this little white book, although it is chunky, but as you can see when you look inside, there's an affirmation, for example, for each and every card. And I have to say kudos to the creators, because there is the same amount of information that we can find for the majors and also for the minors, which is not always the case when it comes to little white books. So you got an affirmation. So we were talking about the Two of Swords. Look at this. So many words are stuck in my throat, turning into a single plea. Don't speak. Let this affair end here. I have to say many of these affirmations or sentences or quotes are really powerful, just as this one. And then it talks about the card a little bit, and it tells you the girl's internal conflict is symbolized by the black hand, representing inner closure and contradiction. She remains still, her eyes reflecting a stagnant state. The Two of Swords signifies inner struggle, clashing thoughts, and reluctance to face fears. Obviously, there might be different interpretation to the cards, and that's also something that I appreciate a lot, because it will give me the opportunity to consider whether I want to read that card in this way or the usual way I read it with. So it is kind of manga style. Let me just zoom in a bit more. As you can see, it is kind of manga style, but at the same time it's very quirky. It is very quirky. There's a lot to say about the way in which all of these characters have been represented. Just as a disclaimer, I guess, or a trigger warning, there's a lot of teeth. I don't know whether there is, something to a name that talks about the fear of teeth. I have no idea, but nowadays there's names that cover any kind of fear, so perhaps there is one as well. I just don't know that one, but it is that kind of very specific type of manga that is kind of diabolical and scary at the same time. But I really, really like it. It's something that it's just really, it finds its own space in my heart. My heart is very big, and so I find a lot of space for any kind of style. But when it comes to manga and when it comes to darker or quirkier deck, I actually really, really love them. So you will see that there's a couple of cards that do belong, let's say, to the major arcanas, but they are not the traditional ones. And so, for example, this one is called Anxiety, and you can definitely understand why, because there is this character that is always accompanied by this really scary shadow figure that follows her, and then there is Lost. And I have to say, this card is really beautiful. I just really love the juxtaposition of these two colors. And then obviously we start with the Suit of Wands. So it is really quirky, but at the same time I will invite you to see how the different expressions of these characters actually speaks a lot about the cards themselves. And that is something that I really appreciate, because it is not just quirky for quirky's sake, if that makes sense. It is not just there to provoke and to scare you off, perhaps. I love the Knight of Swords because of the eye patch, for example, but also, I don't know if you can notice, but this looks, to me at least, this looks like one of those horses you can find on a carousel, so a merry-go-round or something like that. And so it feels like this Knight of Swords is just going nowhere, or maybe it's just going around in circles. So that obviously gives you the opportunity to elaborate on that message. And when we're moving on to the Suit of Cups, for example, the Three of Cups, in this case, there is this sense of community and sense of friendship, but it's a really quirky sense of friendships, because it looks like these are ghouls or, spirits that are kind of malevolent, or you never know, because at the same time, this could also be representing something positive. You never know. Really, really excited by this deck. I haven't started using it, as in using it for readings yet, but I have started using it as in, let's have a look at how it reads, and then I put it back in order because it's just easier to study it this way for me. The Nine of Pentacles, for example, it is such a different take on the Nine of Pentacles. This is the windfall that you receive. Generally speaking, that's the way in which we read the Nine of Pentacles. But in this case, you can see that this person is actually chained to this kind of cage. And so that looks almost as if it were an Eight of Swords taken one step further. What will happen to you when you actually release yourself from the cage and you escape the cage and you're so free that you're still sitting on top of it? And perhaps that's what we can think about, when we want to reach ourselves at this stage of our own making. We would still sit on it for a while in order to gather that courage that you have to use in order to escape the cage, but you don't have enough yet in order to move away from it as well. So it's almost as if it were a release in 2 stages. Really quirky, as I said, manga style, very intense, absolutely love it. I also really like this kind of red, coppery red kind of gilding, really, really amazing. And then just to remain within a deck that I have presented to you recently, that I really, really am so passionate about. This is the Unveiled Tarot. I just love this deck so much. I did a walkthrough, and if you have been watching my channel, you will be surprised because I generally don't do walkthrough. I believe that there's a lot of walkthroughs out there that you can check, and there's a lot of people that do walkthroughs in a much better way than me. So obviously I'm also one that is actually looking at and watching walkthroughs on YouTube and Instagram and TikTok, for example. But I felt like I really needed to give my own perspective on these cards because this deck hits the right spot all the time. It gives me fantastic readings, so much so that when I decided to go to the tarot conference in Western Australia, which has just ended, we were invited to bring a deck, obviously because there were workshops and we would have had to pull cards, etc. And so I was going through my decks and I was thinking, which one should I take, and I had no hesitation whatsoever because this is a deck that I really want to delve deeper into. I want to understand not just the intention of the creator Justin Odonovan, but also the way in which this deck actually speaks to me and me only. So there is something to be said about intuition. I believe that intuition is a wonderful thing, but it's never to be taken by itself. When we want to read a deck, we need to know the system behind the deck. We need to understand what the creator was thinking when they were creating that deck, and then we can make this deck our own by, let's say, adding up that layer of intuition that we apply to the cards. I would never just read intuitively. I would still want to know what the intention was. And it's also because sometimes I may find out additional things that I may have missed had I not been studying the deck. This one is absolutely fantastic. I highly recommend it. If you want, you can watch my walkthrough or other people's walkthrough. I believe that also Simon for the Hermit's Cave has been talking about this deck, and it was also really, really shocked by how intense and powerful this deck is. This is by Liminal 11, by the way, but you can, like other decks from the same company, you can also find it on Amazon, or they may be sold at your local metaphysical bookstore. So I absolutely recommend it. It is very affordable, and it's already, so if you notice that it's warped, it's because I have been using this deck a lot in the last 4 weeks. So when I received it, it was perfect. It's a bit warped right now because I'm really using it a lot, but other than that, it had absolutely no flaws when I got it. And another deck that I want to show you, it's an oracle deck, in fact, and it's the oracle deck that I'm using with my members when I do the energies of the week's videos. This is the Cosmic Pearl Oracle by Ashley Frost and Leah Showman, and I have to angle the deck this way in order to show you the title and the creators. And also this is published by Sacred Scribe Publishing, because as you notice, the title is in foil, silver foil, which is not always visible. If I do like that, it's not visible. So this is the deck that, as I said, I use in my energies of the video. So every week I post these videos in which I pull a card for each and every elemental group of zodiac signs. So for the fire signs, the water signs, the earth signs, and the air signs, and I talk about what the card means and what that relates to the energy that those signs can expect for that specific week. And every month we change deck. And so it's been really fun because I've been doing this for over a year now, and and that means 14 different decks that we go through which is very interesting. Sometimes the decks really works, sometimes they don't. It's totally fine because it's the experience that counts. And I also like to point out that sometimes you really need to use a deck also to see that it doesn't work for you. So, you know, there's that. I absolutely love this deck. It is one of those decks that really works very well, especially when you focus on the energy that the card is evoking for you. This one with the kittens is absolutely adorable. So this one is, for example, called Bountiful Boundaries. It's safe to say no, stay strong, loving barrier. I remember I pulled this, I believe, it may have been for the fire signs a couple of weeks ago, and you know, this one is very conducive to recommend to the advice to say yes, you're a fire sign, so you're always marching on, you're always powering through, but just be aware that it is okay to say no sometimes. It is okay to understand that there are boundaries between ourselves and there is the creation of a safe space. So if the fire energy for the Aries, Leo and Sagittarius signs always burning, let's not forget that we also need to rekindle that flame every now and then, and we can do that when we feel that we are thriving in a safe space. So never be afraid of saying no, or of saying I understand you, but right now I need to be by myself, this is my safe space and I need to be within that for now. So there's a lot to talk about this deck because it is beautiful when it comes to the art style, as you can see. There's always pearls in these cards. Obviously it is called the Cosmic Pearl after all. But what I really love is the fact that it gives you a couple of concepts expressed at the bottom of the card in these sentences. So not just the title with Divine Desires, for example, but also with Soul Callings, Follow Your Heart, and Inner Whispers. So as you can see, each and every one of these cards is very balanced and grounded, which is something that I always appreciate in an oracle deck. Really gorgeous. It goes well with a number of decks, as you can imagine, because obviously being this type of Renaissance style art, it can pair up really well with similar decks, tarot decks, such as, for example, the Tarot Persephone's Garden, but the Aphrodite Tarot, and other decks like that. So the Oracle of Delphi as well. So there's a number of decks that you can actually pair up with this one, and they work really well together. So the next deck is, again, going back to my original passion for the quirky and the dark. And also this is the mini or the pocket edition of the Teknebrae. So it is spelled this way, I'm probably not pronouncing it correctly, Teknebrae Tarot by Pixel Occult. Absolutely loving all of these decks. I have, by the way, a few more. I have the Neon Moon Tarot, I have the Lost Hollow. I want to buy the new edition of the Lost Hollow because they reverted back to those kind of maroon color borders, which I really love. And this one though is probably the latest one that I bought. I bought it about 8-9 months ago when I went to Vietnam. And I didn't necessarily have a lot of time to look into this one, but I really appreciate it and I like it. And I did a reading with this a couple of weeks ago for a friend of mine, and it reads really well. And so after that, I started just pulling the cards for myself not every day, but every 3 or 4 days, because I find it really cool. This is back in order because I was showing it to another friend on Zoom the other day, and it's just really cool. It's got that, let's call it cyberpunk, but it's a very technological cyberpunk. So it's a new, I would call it a new cyberpunk, if that makes sense at all, in the sense that there is still that style from the mid-90s, but it is even more technological or sci-fi, if that makes any sense at all. I hope it does. So very quirky. You can see here there's always masks, for example, and these masks remind me a lot of sci-fi movies rather than horror movies in a way. And it might be just me, but I really appreciate that. I love the desk out riding a motorcycle and just, you know, keeping their mouth open, almost as if they were laughing at us because they're coming directly at us. So there is this breaking the fourth wall and looking directly at the reader. And the temperance card, the devil, is gorgeous, as you can see. The tower is obviously a skyscraper, and it looks almost as if it reminds me of one of those antenna tower for broadcasting, for example. So that is really cool. You know, the star card, really gorgeous. And there's a number of things that I really appreciate out of this deck. This is obviously on the darker side. There's no two ways around that. It is called the Teknebrae, so Tenebrae, you know, darkness, referring to the darkness. I also love the fact that because it does have this kind of poker size, I would call it, you will see that the number and the seed, so the minor in the cards, is actually at the top left corner, and it looks almost as if it were you know, when you look at poker cards, it feels like it's got the same kind of setup, which I really like as well. And so this is obviously a black and white and a few shades of grey kind of deck, so it's not for everyone. I completely understand that. However, if you do like pixel occult art style and the very specific vibes of their decks, I'm pretty sure you will love this one as well, because it does have, you know, it does take you into that world that is a world where it feels like everything is lost, but if you still that you are one of the survivors, as almost as if you were a dark angel. You know, the story, the mythology around dark angels, that they have been helping the world after a catastrophe or a pandemic or whatever has happened, you know, Armageddon. The story goes that all of the humans have been brought to a different planet, and the earth has been populated by dark angels that chose to remain behind after the Armageddon in order to you know, still populate the earth, but they are obviously dark angels. So it does give you those kind of sci-fi vibes, but very dark future kind of vibes that I really love. And there is finally a little bit of body shape diversity as well, which is always appreciated. So really loving this deck. Very similar vibes to the Soul Splash Tarot, but it's not manga style. It is definitely cyberpunk style, just in case you were wondering. And as I was saying, so really looking forward to the fourth, I believe it is, if not the fifth edition of the Lost Hollow, because it will revert back to those really gorgeous maroon color borders. Now the next deck is a huge difference between, there's a massive difference between these two, because as much as the Teknebrae was dark and quirky, this one is very filled with light and really good vibes, and it's this one here. So it is the Tarot of the Cosmic Seed by Lelania Simone. I am in love with the fact that this deck has maintained the really beautiful trait of its indie edition. This is not the indie edition is the mass market edition, and sometimes, and I hope you'll agree with me, that sometimes, unfortunately, to keep the costs down, mass market publishers, they skipped on a couple of details that made the indie edition so much more luxuriant. In this case, I believe we have everything. We have a really beautiful two-part box, and we have this small, but still it's there, a little white book, as you can see. Not a lot of information in this one. It would have been wonderful to have a bit more, but it still gives you the opportunity to read with the cards and even learn to read with this specific deck if you don't already know it. And I really love this gilding. This color is my favorite, teal green, teal blue. So really well done, good job to Wiser. It's Red Wheel Wiser, by the way, being the publisher. And so let's have a look at the cards. As I was saying, this is a tarot deck that feels like it's filled with light, and I really appreciate that. Lelania Simone, this year it's her year, because you would notice that there is also a Kickstarter campaign that I backed, and unfortunately I believe it's finished. So if you missed out, I'm not entirely sure I believe that at the time of filming, there may be still 1 day left on the campaign, but I could be wrong, and I'm almost certain that by the time in which I will be posting this video, it will be already over. But it is something, it's called the Myth Reader's Tarot, and I am very excited by that deck because it looks rather different from what we're used to when we think about Lalania's artwork. If you think about the Oracle of Awakenings, for example, it is very similar to the Tarot of the Cosmic Seed in the sense that it is this really beautiful, fabulous, I would say glamorous kind of collage. I really love this, and I think that glamorous is the way to go, even though there are spiders on the deck, trigger warning. Because of the choice of colors, because of the way in which, you know, the cards have been. Also, there's this geometrical grid on the background of the cards, which is rather interesting in some of the cards at least. But you do have the sacred geometry, which is rather interesting, as I said. So really, really loving this deck. I use it a lot. I don't feel like it. In many cases it's a bit weird, or I'm probably a bit weird, but in many cases I feel like I can read straight away with the deck, and sometimes I feel like I really need to study it before I hazard a reading. In this case, I felt like this deck was hitting home immediately. It was spot on in the readings. I still like to go back and read the guidebook whenever I do a reading, sometimes when I'm interested to see the specific meanings assigned to a card. But at the same time, when it does give me the idea that I can read straight away out of the box, generally speaking, it is one of those decks that I really, really appreciate and I really, really like. And this one is absolutely one of them. I love the Nine of Cups, by the way. It just reminds me a lot of those of elixirs and potions, and really, really passionate about this. Now, this one, as I said, is, let's say, a very light deck, and I appreciate that. But it also, you know, it brings me to an argument or a theme that I want to talk about. So I was at the Tarot conference in WA, and there were a few speakers. One of them was the Priestess Moon, and the Priestess Moon is the creator of this oracle deck, which I absolutely love. And it's this one here. It's called the Deadly Apothecary Oracle, which has been published by Rockpool. I already loved this deck before I met her. She's a really lovely person, and she actually gave us the possibility to understand this deck even more by looking at each and every one of these plants. And so she started by saying that she has done a past lives reading, and she's found out that in one of her past lives she used to be a monk, and in specific one of the monks that was actually working in the herbarium, so it was really working with all of the plants, growing plants, using plants, preparing concoction, preparing you know, in many cases poisons and also antidotes. And that's the theme of this deck, which I really appreciate. So this is not your usual botanical decks, because admittedly we have so many, me included, probably too many, because let's face it, you don't necessarily need 4 decks that you know, they bring about all of the same plants, and also they're all with the same associations with those plants. So if you have one, that's probably enough, unless you like another one because of the aesthetics. But this one is not your usual one. So this one is actually focusing on plants that can be used as poisonous plants and to produce a poisonous substance. And so the approach to these plants is to understand that you may start with the poison, but then you have the opportunity to use an antidote against the poison. And so if the card starts with something negative, you have the opportunity to revert to something positive. In particular, let me just show you, because there's one that really resonated with me, and I'm worried that I've actually skipped it. There you go, it's this one here. It's called the Death Cap, so it's obviously a mushroom. So the death cap is a poisonous kind of mushroom. If you eat it, you will either it's deadly or it's very poisonous. So obviously it's recommended not to eat it. But what this card is telling us is that you need to step into your own power. So this, when she was talking about this deck, this card in specific, she was asking us to ask ourselves whether that resonated with us or not. And she went through all of the cards. And when she went through the explanation of the death cap, which is starting from when you were little, you were told that you're too sensitive, you're too emotional, and you should dial it down, and you should keep it to yourself, and it's not becoming. And it's just all of these things that I have literally been pestered with throughout my, until I was probably, at least until I was an adolescent, so until my teenage years. But then it became, when you're a teenager, people kind of understand that you're being emotional because of hormones. And then when that did not settle, because I kept on being emotional and looking emotional and really making people feel uncomfortable for how emotional I was. And I'm not talking about crying in front of people. Being emotional in today's society is something of a no-no. You're not supposed to be emotional. You're not supposed to laugh out loud too much, because it is too much. You're not supposed to, be over enthusiastic about something, because it is too much. And society dictates that women should not be standing out too much, and so don't look in a certain way, don't grow your hair too long, because people will start thinking that you're a witch. And I am not kidding. These are things that I've actually been told personally by people, not by my own family, probably my dad all the time, but that's because my dad had different, he had a mental illness, so that was not his intention to be like that. And on the one hand, I had my auntie and my mom in a certain way that were really telling me, no, you're perfect as you are, just go on and just be. And then like a million other people telling me, no, you shouldn't be reacting like this, you're too emotional, you're too sensitive to things. And it was a battle. And so I really found that what she was saying about this card really resonated with me, and I wrote it down. And so one way to turn a poison into something positive is to admit that if this is you, you just be you and step into your own power. That could be my superpower. Probably being sensitive made me the compassionate person that I am right now. And I would not trade it for anything. I would never want to be a non-emotional, standing out for how I live my emotions and how I go around with my heart on my sleeve. That is something that, of course, you make yourself very vulnerable to other people's judgment, but so be it. It's one of the downsides of it. But on the other hand, I do recognize that I can support a lot of people because I can feel what they're feeling. I am an empath, and that is extremely important to me, and that is an extremely positive thing to me, not a negative one. So I really appreciate this deck because, as I said, it gives you the opportunity to focus on plants, but it does give you a different perspective on them, and it can read really, really well. And as a matter of fact, I just wanted to show you very quickly how it reads with a really incredibly beautiful tarot deck. So I really love to pair it with this tarot deck, which is the Tarot of the Drowning World. It is an indie deck. I don't remember whether this is still for sale, whether it's out of print or out of stock. I don't remember. I do think that the creators have this deck still for sale in their website, but I'm not entirely sure. So you will probably need to double check. And sometimes the problem is that at the time of filming, it could still be in stock. But if you watch this video maybe 6 months from now, it might not be in stock anymore. In any case, look at how these two work together. They're absolutely fantastic. And it's not just because, of course, there's a lot of botanical elements in the tarot deck as well. And obviously you can make that parallel. But it's also because I believe that the Drowning world, the Tarot of the Drowning world, has a very similar kind of concept. So obviously the concept of the drowning world is a very triggering kind of concept. We know that, it's fine. But the creators knew that when they were creating this deck, when they were organizing, the photo shoot and everything. But at the same time, what they wanted to do is to stop time in a snapshot and just show you what that looks like in the moment between. So it's a continuity. When you talk about drowning and not drowned, it's not past tense, it points to continuity. It is at the same time always in motion, but at the same time frozen, because it still shows you what is possible, but it gives you the possibility to revert back to a different state of being. So I really love this deck. It does have let's say multiple layers of interpretation to it. So of course you have to pick yours and you have to study the deck. And I have to say the guidebook is probably one of the most interesting one that I've ever read. I've talked about the guidebook a number of times and I'm still really a fan. I love the fact that many of these cards will resonate because they show you, for example, the character breaking the fourth wall, but ironically, because they're keeping their eyes closed, it doesn't have the same effect as other cards. But it does have a similar layout as to the Oracle deck. And so I absolutely love these two together. And really my pick for, the top 11 decks that I'm really loving, vibing with at the moment, these two are just fantastic. So we're down to the last three. So let's have a look at this one, which is one of the cutest deck that I've got in my collection. I understand that it's not cute for everyone. It is cute for me. I don't know whether I have the same taste as many others, but to me, elephants are cute, cats are cute, for example. And so this one is the Green Glyph Tarot by James R. Eads. This came from a Kickstarter campaign from a couple of years ago, I believe. And it came together with a Lenormand, a runes deck and an oracle deck, and also a book. I only have the oracle and the tarot deck. Unfortunately, the box came this way, which is a pity because it's a bit ruined, but it's fine. I know that sometimes, when you don't have that additional protective sleeve inside the box, that is what may happen. Loving this gilding, by the way. It's golden, but it's holographic at the same time, which is really, really cool. And so this is a deck that is on a smaller side, and that makes it already kind of cute to begin with. But also I really do appreciate that in many cases the cards look like they have a minimalist style, but they're actually not. As you can see, they're fully scenics. So it actually is, and look at these 10 of stones, for example. The stones have eyes and a smiley face. So I really, really love this. I think that the Suit of Cups, which is populated with elephant, is probably my favorite. Because I do love elephants. This is the Four of Cups. So it still shows you, for example, those elements that will be very helpful to you to remember the meaning of that specific card. But at the same time, it does so in a very cute way, in a very kind way. I love the art style that is quite simple but very effective. I also really, really love the color palette because I really love the association with these greens and the oranges and the yellow and the burnt orange as well. So it gives me a lot of very well balanced vibes that I appreciate. At the same time, I understand that it's also one of those decks that has a lot of symbols in it, and that would be really interesting. So if you want to study this deck, it may give you material to study for a few days. And I have to say, James R. Eads is also famous for, these really interesting take on divination. For example, one of the latest Kickstarters that is launched and already sent out the decks for was called the Cerulean deck. I don't remember whether it's called the Cerulean Oracle or just a cerulean deck. But in any case, it is a deck that is based on numerology, and so it is very interesting because of that. If you read numerologically, you will find that deck is extremely helpful, and also at the same time very beautiful, aesthetic, and very, very pleasing. So this is definitely one of those decks, and sometimes I actually pick it back up and I just do a reading because it feels like it's a really nice deck, and I really, really love the art style and everything. These are the bags, for example, which are similar to the box, and you see this passion for symbols, esoteric symbols that can be really interesting and at the same time a bit of a mystery. So the last two decks are oracle decks, and this one is a French oracle deck, but I have to say the first edition that I had of this deck was actually in Italian, because it was called Lo Scrigno degli Oracoli, so the Oracle's Chest. And this one has been reprinted by Grimaud in France. It is still obviously originally an Italian deck. The authors are Italian, Fabio Nocentini and Massimo Alfaioli. And it's called Les Oracles de la Sorcière. The reason why I don't have the Italian version anymore and I stick to the French one is because of the size. So basically the Italian version is published by De Vecchi. If you're familiar with this publisher, you will remember that their decks are really, really tall. Really, really tall, to the point that it is impossible for me to find a sustainable way to shuffle the deck. These ones have a very manageable size, and it comes in this 2-part box, which I really like. It does not come with a guidebook, which the Italian version actually does, but it does show you these cards with the meanings. So at the end of the day, you don't necessarily feel like you're missing out on a guidebook, because you also have a couple of opportunities for a spread here. There's at least a few cards with spreads in the front and at the back, so that is a very interesting way to work with this deck. And then you will see that it does have at least 2 cards each for these for the 3 groups of cards that we have in this deck. So we'll look at them later, but basically you have the Oracle of the Cat, as you can see, Oracle du Chat, and then you have the Oracle of the Witches, the Oracle de Sorcière, and Oracle de Dieu, so the gods and goddesses oracle. So it is one deck, but it is divided in 3. You can choose to read by shuffling the cards all together, or you can choose to maybe keep them separated and then only pick a card from the 3, so 3 cards in total, but only 1 from each and every group, which it's definitely an interesting way to use this deck. I do a bit of both. Sometimes I want to separate them, sometimes I just shuffle them all together. This is, when it comes to the art style, I really like it. This is the Oracle of Cats, for example. Really cute. I love these cats because they are depicted as cats. They are not anthropomorphized, so they're not dressed in human clothes. I've got nothing against that, but it just doesn't resonate with me. Cats are cats, and I really do appreciate them when they are depicted this way. Obviously, there is no cat that will be wearing a crown, but if you know cats, you will know that even if the crown is invisible, they're still wearing it. So they do have that kind of a prince attitude, or queen attitude. And then we're moving on to the the Witches Oracle, which is very beautiful. It's got that very intense pagan vibes, I would say. Also, when you look at the symbols on the cards, very interesting. The keywords are titles, so sometimes they resonate. This is poverty, for example. Sometimes they resonate, sometimes they don't. But as I said, this is adversity, for example, so it's not that difficult to elaborate on the meaning of the titles. If it is in some cases, then you just have the cards and you can just go back to the cards and read what the other associations are. So this is the part of the deck that is associated with gods and goddesses, and it looks very much like it's Roman time, depicting Roman times and something like that. This one is probably the most difficult one, or the one that I find the most difficult part of this deck to read. But at the same time, I like to go to the guidebook and have a look. So really, really passionate about this deck. It is amazing. I do prefer to keep them separate, but and I probably read mostly from the Witch's Oracle and the Cat's Oracle. But then again, it can really, you can use all of it as you please or as it best works for you, because we all have the possibility to bond with the deck. So definitely a really beautiful one. As I said, it does come in an Italian version. It's both of them are mass market, so you will be able to find them in, let's say, your Amazon, for example. But there is a French version, which is this one here, and an Italian version as well. And last but not least, it's another Oracle deck, and it's also French. This one is called the Divinatio Codex, and it's based on l'Oracle da Vinci, so on Leonardo da Vinci's drawings, let's say, and sketches. It is a Oracle deck, and it's produced, released, or created rather by Sandita 2.0 and Voglio Bene. This is the French edition. There's also another deck by the same authors, which is called the Marque Tu m'aimes, which translates into English as in Tell Me You Love Me. And that has been picked up in English by Rockpool, and it will be released in a few months. I am not entirely sure. And it's also because sometimes Rockpool, if there is a Mind, Body, Spirit festival, which is the case this week for Sydney, they tend to sell decks that have not been released yet. So I might be able to get a copy, or maybe not. It really is just very, very difficult to know in advance. I'll keep an eye out for that in any case. This one is absolutely gorgeous. I love this deck so much. And the other one, so the Du Marque Tu m'aimes, Tell Me You Love Me, will be published by Los Carabel, but it's by Rockpool, but it's not as beautiful as this one. So the other deck also has gold foil, and I really, really like it. It is a very busy kind of art style. As you can see, it is curated, but at the same time, there's a lot of personal modification applied to the images. In many cases, you will notice that there is a lot of tattoos that you can see here, for example. And that's a really interesting way to make these images your own. And I really, really like the way it's been done. Sometimes it could be a bit corny, it's not necessarily always a winning kind of modification. It doesn't always resonate. And I believe that in this case, it's done in such a fantastic way that I absolutely have no problem in accepting, all the modifications in the curated art style. I have no idea whether that will resonate with everyone, probably not, but I don't expect any deck to do so. What I really do appreciate is the fact that, for example, when we're looking at the Mona Lisa, so the La Gioconda here, it is very well done. So there is this tattoo here on the hand and also here on the chest. And it just, it's not too much. It's good enough. And it's something that really makes you relate to the image even more. Also, the additional flowers are around the head and the other elements that have been added digitally, I imagine, to the image. So this one, it's just obviously the keywords are in French, but they're not too difficult. Perfection, apogee and transcendence, paralysis, mutism, and stagnation. So as you can see, it is not very difficult to still gather the meaning of these keywords. And it's a deck that, as I was saying earlier, this is one of the decks that pair up really, really nicely with your Renaissance style curated art decks that we have been appreciating so much in the last 3 or 4 years. So I would highly recommend this deck because it's absolutely gorgeous. And also this one, if you buy from Amazon France, you will pay only 26 euros, I believe. And then obviously you have to add the shipping cost, but it is worth it because it's really, really amazing. So that was it for today. So we talked about the 11 decks and I'm really vibing with lately. I'm crashing on them. I have absolutely no shame in saying this because I do believe that sometimes looking at a deck that we really like actually makes us feel better. And so this is the right time for me to be looking at these decks. That I hope that you enjoyed this video. Let me know what your choice will be for 11 decks that you're currently gashing on, currently vibing with. And I'm always open to suggestion. But for now, have a great day.